Welcome to the Vancouver UFO Meetup Group. This is September 16th, 2020. Our guest is Jim Wilhelmsen. He's a friend of Gordy Tong, who's here. And Jim's currently in the Detroit metro area, and he's a curator of a museum based on his lifetime study and research of the topic of UFOs and aliens. The museum reflects a colorful past with much intensive study, research, and personal investigation spanning 4 decades. Jim was a 10-year member of MUFON as a researcher, investigator, a 4-year resident and owner of a bookstore museum in the downtown city of Roswell, New Mexico, across the street from the International UFO Museum. Jim is also an ordained Christian minister, as an alumnus of Central Bible College, Assemblies of God, and ordained into Christian ministries since 1976. He was also a Vietnam-era veteran serving in the U.S. Army Special Forces Rapid Deployment Hawk Missile Unit, part of the NORAD defense system. Christian ministry has always been an outside-of-the-box adventure. His first congregation was former members of Detroit area outlaw-type bikers who found a new life in Jesus, counseling across addictions and a lifestyle heavily influenced by demonic powers, deliverance, and spiritual warfare, developed as his everyday normal routine. The same process developed into a spiritual way of terminating the phenomenon of alien abduction using the same methods of inner healing and deliverance. This became an important part of recent ministry for dealing with aliens and any and all unwanted paranormal intrusions. His book, written 25 years ago, predicted many of the events that are now front page news and hot topics of sci-fi and documentaries. The museum reflects all of this and the hope and promises from a God who is in complete control and promises to provide and protect us. This positive hope is the final touch to the theme of the museum, mixing many elements and visual models to make the complicated seem easy for everyone to understand. So his books are available at Amazon. The book is Beyond Science Fiction, Jim Wilhelmsen, and there's a link we'll put below this video. So welcome to the show for the first time, or welcome to the Vancouver UFO Meetup. Jim, here we are. This is your office of your museum, right?
Yes, it is. And thank you for being here. It's my honor and pleasure to be a part of your meeting.
Yeah, thanks for joining us so late. It's you're 3 hours behind. You're in Detroit. We're in Vancouver. It's 8:30 at night here, and 11:30 at night.
Yeah, and I'm an old guy and I go to bed early, but you know, this is worth
Oh.
it. It's worth it, and I enjoy being here. Thank you.
Yeah, where should we start? Do you want to tell us about your museum or a bit about your history?
Well, you know, the thing is that the museum reflects my life, and I got to say that I always seem to be at the right place at the right time. A lot of these things pursued me. I didn't really pursue them. I kind of fell into it. But I can tell you that I've had a lifelong fascination with UFOs, aliens. You know, being an old guy, I mean, I was 5 years old when I kept my first newspaper article about Sputnik being launched. Yuri Gagarin, first man in space, Neil Armstrong. I mean, I followed the space program all the way through. I was a young boy in the 50s, and I watched all of the old-time science fiction movies of the 50s. Probably know them almost by heart by now. And they were one of the main things that I was always focused on. And I remember one particular night as a kid looking up in the stars and saying, you know, are you guys out there? And if you are you friendly? Are you, you know, who are you? And what do you want from us? And I kind of think maybe accidentally, I didn't realize it, but that was probably my open invitation for them to begin to intrude into my life, so that this whole lifetime fascination is not only something that I've studied, I've experienced it. And after I said something like that, I remember from about 5 years old to 12 years old, I was a victim of alien abduction. And no, I didn't get nabbed by the Greys. I got nabbed by the Nordics. And so by saying that, I mean, it was less scary, less physically enduring. I mean, they didn't prod and put sticks up, you know, all your orifices and do all kinds of crazy genetic things, but they did a lot of mind tricks with you, having you almost like exercise mental capabilities to go beyond what we normally have. And I remember being very argumentative all the time. Remember one time I was being abducted, and I kept complaining that I had a test tomorrow at school, and it was important for me to be back there to get some sleep so I could do a good job and get good grades on my test tomorrow. And as I was looking around, I noticed that now I lived in a very rural area, and I noticed that almost my entire classmates and classroom people were there being abducted also by the same people and going through the same tests. And then I realized, wow, what is going on? At least if we're doing a class curve, they're in the same boat I'm in, so it can't be too bad tomorrow. But I'd like to think that they gave up on me because of that, but probably I failed to measure up to whatever their qualifications were. And at right about 12 years old, it seemed to cease to continue on. Now, my thoughts were that this was just an overworked imagination. I was fascinated by science fiction, movies, and so I was just having science fiction dreams. Although zooming up, later in life when I was an adult researcher and studying the idea of alien abduction, I'm finding all of the events that led up to the actual abductions were something that defined my childhood. And then I realized, oh my gosh, this defines my childhood. Those weren't dreams, those were reality. I'd have the humming in my ears. I would have just a sense or feeling, oh boy, I'm going to have one of those science fiction dreams tonight. Sometimes they were fun and fascinating. Other times they were pretty terrifying. And I knew that what I called shadow people were going to be there at night. And they were like they were probably the grays. I could only see them out of my peripheral vision, just like a shadow, and I couldn't really see them. And they were telepathically, talking to me. And I got so scared, I'd throw the covers over my head and usually pass out of just pure fear. And I would wake up having this dream, or I'd wake up remembering about a dream that I had. And I just thought it was overworked imagination, just like, a kid thing, and I let it go. It wasn't until, like I said, I was in about 45 or 46 when I started researching all of this on a more serious level that I realized, oh my God, that defines my childhood. I was a victim of abduction. So I started praying about it more. I got flash memories more vivid of what did actually transpire through some of these things. And then as I progressed in investigating and became a researcher for MUFON, it just more of it kind of was explained to me. Now, I was able to take it back, praying to a God that I believe is in control, and then I would find specific scriptures that actually detailed all of this. So my work is the most groundbreaking in that what I'm doing is, thanks to many of the secular people like yourselves that have done some of this research, I was willing to step away from the pew and the pulpit and investigate it myself, only I did it through a biblical lens. So what I add to the table is, wow, the Bible has an answer for all these different things, even quantum physics, even artificial intelligence, cloning. All of these things are in the scriptures, and I seem to have been able to find prayerfully all of the references that pertain to what's going on now. So in my museum, I think the biblical perspective kind of fills in some of the gaps to some of the mysteries that all of us are trying to figure out. And so now I see it in the scriptures. My expertise is in the original languages going back to the Greek, Aramaic, and the Hebrew. And this is really, if I had any specialty field, it would be that, less on the science. But I'm a geek. I mean, when I was a kid, I was growing up at 14 years old, I think, or 13 years old, the little golden books weren't enough information. So I went to the library to start reading books that had deeper thoughts on anything from archaeology, geology, paleontology. I mean, I was into all of this, the biology. What I didn't realize that at 13, 14 years old, I was reading college textbooks. And so by the time I became 25 or 30, I already had equal to a college education in many of these sciences, only because it was my childhood interest. Some people, had hobbies. Mine was being a geek. I love to study and read. And so I amassed a lot of information at an early age. Now, the other crazy thing about my background is that I grew up with two totally different environments. My parents grew up in what was a rural kind of a rural middle class, working mostly automotive industry related community in the boondocks in the country. I mean, I lived on a dirt road. There was a creek right across the street from me, and on the other side of the creek, about a mile away, was a horse ranch. I knew how to ride a horse before I knew how to ride a Harley. And that was just the neighborhood that I grew up as a country kid. But 4 miles down the road, on the other side of the border between the suburbs and Detroit, was a neighborhood called, a section of Detroit called Brightmoor. And it was probably, even back then, one of the worst rough tumble ghetto type neighborhoods. My grandparents lived there. So I spent half of my life growing up as a country boy and half of my life growing up in the hood. So I knew both environments. I knew what it was like to live in an inner city forsaken neighborhood that, you know, was basically a ghetto. And I grew up in the country. So my strange mixture, even now, today, I find myself working in the circuits with professionals and PhDs and people of various degrees. But at the same time, I'm working with the homeless in the inner city of Detroit, and I feel very comfortable in both. The first ministry I ever had was I pioneered one of the first evangelical Christian motorcycle clubs. Why? Well, my first experience in life, after being a geek and being beat up and made fun of for being a geek, I guess in my rebellious time period in my life to rebel against it, I ended up getting a motorcycle. I really liked it. Next thing you know, I'm riding in a motorcycle club, 17 years old, packing a gun, not being a Boy Scout. I'm not proud of where I went and the path that I took, but I experienced, we'll put it this way, I was the only probably Delta Force recruit that already had combat experience before I joined the service. So that's pretty kind of weird.
You had combat experience in Detroit?
Yes.
What kind of combat would you have in your 17?
Well, let's not even go there too far,
Oh.
because some things don't have a statute of limits, but I was exposed to a lot at 17 years old, which really gave me a rapid grow in the realities of things. And I had wonderful parents that were full of love. They were great parents. Their love for my brother and I is what pulled me out from ever, you know, going off the deep end. And when I was exposed to some of the violence that was within the culture of the bike gangs, it's like, mom and dad raised me too good to be like this. I can't be a part of this. It's okay to act cool and think you're cool, but then it's another thing to see the dark side of it, where it includes, you know, firing and shooting at each other and getting crazy like that. That's not a price and an avenue that I wanted to go down. And so I quit that environment completely. So by the time I went into the service, I was probably, I would say, a spoiled child, a hurt kid. But when I came out, it became out a whole man on his way to restoration. What I learned in the military, being a first responder, helped me to grow up in a big way. So, and I'm forever thankful for the military service that I did have. But you know, I was in the rear with the gear. I mean, I was part of Delta Force, but I never met Chuck Norris. I didn't get to, you know, do all the cool things you see in the movies. Because I was in artillery, that was in the rear. So I got all the training that they had, but I didn't actually go and do all the crazy, dangerous things that they did. But I got to hear all about it because we both had equal classifications in our military. So they were allowed to speak to us and we were allowed to speak to them. Nobody else in our unit could, because they didn't have the classification that we had, but it was legally for them to come back. They're all geeked up. They just had victory. And so they had to share it with somebody. They got to share it with us missile guys because we had the same classification and nobody could do anything about it, which is kind of cool for me. I got to hear a lot of weird things. We were still fighting in Korea in the 60s. Before the Vietnam War actually broke out, we already realized, you know, well, when it broke out to all over the place, before Cambodia and Laos became part of it, our first responders already went inside and took out all the leaders of the military leaders in that country before we actually entered into it. So we knew about it like 5 months before the actual events were published in the, you know, I always wondered about that. Why, how come we knew all of this? Because I didn't realize that I was Delta Force until 5 years ago when I saw a documentary on TV and it was talking about the rapid deployment service. And I go, oh, wow, hey, that was what I was in. And I was in the other room, so I was only half listening to the program. And so I went in, I went in to see it in a commercial they cut to. They said, this was the history of Delta Force. And I said, oh, I must have misunderstood something. I couldn't have been in Delta Force. That doesn't describe me. And then they cut back in and then they recapped what they had, you know, left off with. And they said the history of the rapid deployment service, which later was called Delta Force. And then my mouth hung open. I'm going, I was Delta Force? I didn't know it. You know, so it was quite an experience. And I had a whole new sense of appreciation, because I always thought those guys were, you know, who would join that willingly or voluntarily? Well, I did and didn't know it, but, you know, it was, I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful for that I had that kind of experience, because it sobered me up. It got me to realize that, you know, I I was a kid playing around with drugs, messing up, typical 60s kid. But, I was always a conservative, and I was always loved my country and was willing to serve my country. And when I found out that I was that, it gave me a whole new appreciation that, wow, I was in it and I made it. It was tough. I was wondering how come our training was just as tough as the Marines and the Navy SEALs. It's like, duh, because you're in the special forces. It's kind of equal to where they're at. So it kind of reflects everything in my life. I mean, I found myself in things that, in spite of myself, it was very unique. It was very personal. It was very firsthand experiences that can't be denied. And I think that's where it made it all the more real in a lot of the crazy things that I've dealt with. I mean, for the last 40 years, anything that goes thump in the dark, whether it's a Bigfoot or an orb or whatever it might be, I've had to deal with all of this stuff. I'm kind of like the X-Files guy that deals with, this is my normal all the time. And so because it's my normal, I get so used to in conversation talking about these things because that's my life 24/7. So a lot of times when I'm talking to fellow Christians or when I'm talking to even secular people that don't are aware, you guys know as well as I do, there's almost like a parallel reality. The things that you and I have seen and been exposed to is so out of context with the majority of the world. They're just like half asleep and they don't realize it. Well, when you get involved in this stuff 24/7, sometimes you forget how strange that sounds to others. And so we get the backlash on that one, don't we, guys? It's like,
A lot of us feel that way, where we live in this,
yeah,
like you use the term parallel reality. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm interested in your personal experiences. Like you thought like white Nordics, like what's it like and what did they look like? And were you in a ship and details like that? But you can carry on, with your presentation.
Oh, no, this is,
Like,
this is what I want it to be like, where you guys want to lead it to. So, I mean, if that's a question you have, I don't mind sharing right away. Let's just give you what you guys want from me. And I think that way it makes a better show for all of us and we get our answers that we want. So, it's the Nordics that I was abducted by were typical. I mean, they did wear, I remember most of them wore like a blue one-piece, uniform, like kind of like a stretch, fit tight. All the women were very pretty and all the men were very handsome and all buffed out. And actually to me, they looked like the results of controlled genetics. I mean, there was no fat, bald, dumpy guys like me or anything. I mean, they were all, looked like if you had a choice to choose the genetics, this is what you would look like. So they were all very attractive and very healthy and very buffed out and very shapely. So that was, later on in life, I realized, this, okay, because you didn't see any, what we would consider normal kind of people. These were genetically controlled people. It would be like in Star Trek's, the augmented people. I can't remember what the episode showed, but it was all these people that were genetically perfect. And
yeah.
that's what I
So
had.
what year was this? Like, what year were you born, and what year did this start? Like, this is the.
Well, I was born in 1951, so this started probably around 1956, 57, and I think it ended about when it was around 12. So I guess that would be what 60, about 63, 64 is about when it ended. And of course, then one of the results or the residual effects is that you have certain paranormal, things that are kind of like a residual in your life because of the exposure that you had during these abduction experiences. Mine was out of the body travel. I've had several of these situations through my life. And then the last time I remember when I became more spiritually aware of the spiritual implications, I realized, no, this is something I really don't want to be doing. So I called out to God. I quoted a prayer because I was a very young Christian and I didn't know any scripture or anything, but I remembered the Lord's Prayer. And so as I had it, it stopped. And then I realized, oh, there's something more powerful here that I need to realize. And being that I was adding a spiritual dimension to it, gave me more power and authority over than I ever had before at prior times. And it suddenly just instantly stopped. It's from that and some of the addictive counseling that I did when I was working in the bike ministry, where I was able to transfer some of that awareness and knowledge and treat it as more of a spiritual situation rather than just a natural situation. And I've actually been able to terminate for people their abduction experiences under the name and authority of using the name Jesus Christ and having them quote scripture and everything. So I would say probably the when I moved to Roswell, New Mexico, that was in 2003. From 2003 is when I first started doing counseling, when I realized that, I need to treat this whole alien abduction thing as serious, and maybe I can actually help some of these people. I got a chance to meet David Jacobs, and I met, the metal sculptor. He just passed away not too long ago. Well, I think not too long ago. It was probably about 10 years now. Do you guys know who I'm trying to think of? He was a metal sculptor because I was a metal sculptor, so I could relate to him on that.
Bud Hopkins?
Wendell Stevens?
Thank you.
Stevens?
No, Bud Hopkins. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, Bud
Bud
Hopkins.
Hopkins. Yeah. So I got to talk to both of them about abductions and everything. It was really interesting. And I told them, I said, well, I've actually been able to terminate some of these. You said you couldn't because they're more superior, and I agree with you, but I have actually been able to bring termination. They said, well, how do you know that it was terminated? And I said, because it stopped. Because the PTS that they were suffering from, post-traumatic syndrome, it ended too. All of a sudden they were able to get nice sleep and had a different life. And I said, it was because, I said, here's the funny thing. When all of these encounters that we have, no matter what entity is, whether it's a mantis and insectoid type, whether it's the reptilian type, the Greys or the Nordics, they all have one constant, consistent message. They tell us that that they have no problem with any religious figures except for that Jesus of the Bible. They keep telling us, you've got it wrong. He's one of us. He's from Alpha Centauri, or, from the, whatever galaxy. They said, you've got this guy wrong. He's one of us. He's part of us. We sent him here to teach you, goodness and kindness or whatever. And I go, guys, guess what? The only way that I've been able to terminate any of these abductions is using the name and the authority of the one they say we got wrong. I said, could it be that they're lying to us because they know that there's no other name in heaven by which man can be saved or delivered in this situation than with that name? And that's the name and the authority and the guy that I use, because apart from him, I am just as powerless as you to be able to terminate or do anything. But using this, by golly, it stops. It ends. They have no torments anymore. They don't, especially with the Greys, they're not poked and prodded. And my God, some of the most horrendous things is when women are abducted and made to either have sex, or they usually, biologically impregnate, and 3.5 months later, the pregnation is terminated. And all the evidence is there that they had a fetus in them, and now it's been removed. And then later on, they're seeing their own child half human and half whatever the heck it is. How awful that has to be for a woman to have to go through that kind of a thing.
So Jim, were you raised as a Christian right from the beginning?
Oh, absolutely not. No. No, I was raised on Darwin. I mean, remember I said I was
What age did you become Christian then?
Well, that had to be, I'm kind of a thick, boneheaded, stubborn person. It took me 4 years after I got a miracle that there's no way. October 19th, 1970, I should have died in the swamp areas of Florida. I mean, this is really a crazy episode in my life. Here I am in Special Forces, but I was a kid on drugs. Now, I had a crazy background. My dad was a farmer, grew up on a farm, so he taught me all kinds of tricks on how to grow crops. My mother was a president of the American Irish Society. We lived on a 3/4 acre property that was technically called urban farmland. Now, she knew how to hybridize and make her own specific types of irises. So I learned the hybridization process. I knew farming tricks, but guess what I did to do hybridization and farming? I like to smoke marijuana. And I lived in Florida, the ideal growing place for marijuana. And I'm also a 19-year-old kid that not really thinking, I'm thinking, hey, the most obvious is the least suspected. Nobody's going to think I'm going to grow a marijuana crop in the Everglades on a missile base in the middle of the Everglades. That's what I did. What I did is I took the two most potent weeds at the time, which was Colombian gold and Panama red, and I hybridized them together and made Everglade green. And it was super good. It was about equal to a tie stick from back in those days. So here I am with all this geek knowledge, but what do? I become a marijuana grower. Now, the main guy on the base, because we were in Miami, Florida, Homestead Air Force Base, the main guy there, who was probably one of the main dealers on the base, a drug dealer. I mean, he was pretty much, I partly I got in the Army because I thought, well, maybe I'll get away from the drugs. You join the Army and you're getting more drugs there than anywhere else on the planet. And so what happened was, he told me, he says, look, you better not, if you start selling this stuff, you're going to cut into the mob and you're going to end up floating, somewhere in a bog somewhere dead. So he said, I'll tell you what, I got this motorcycle and I don't know how to work on it. You came from a biker background, you know how to work on a Triumph? I said, sure, I had one just like yours. I can tear it down and build it back up. He said, well, I'll make you a trade. You go ahead and grow for your own supply if you want, and don't get too big. And you work for me, I'll work for you. I'll make sure that everything is cool. Your path is clear, and we'll have this little symbiotic relationship. I said, okay, that'll work for me. That's great. So I did that. I grew my crops. The only problem is one of my roommates became a traitor. He was going to sell the arming device to our missile to some South American group, a terrorist group.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, and I told him, I said, what is the matter with you? He says, oh, this missile system's so old. It's back from 1952. I mean, come on, everybody's got it. I said, look, whoever they are, they don't have it and they want it. And guess what? They're going to use it against us. Americans are going to die. Why would you want to do that? I said, besides, you think they're going to give you everything they promised? They're going to get a bullet in the back of the head and you're going to be dead somewhere. Was the guy that betrayed the country, the traitor. He was a friend of mine. The other one was a guy that was he was an older guy. We were like 17 to 19, and he was like 32, and so he was the old guy. He used to get drunk, and then he used to talk about how he used to be a hitman in the syndicate, and he knows everybody there. And we'd say, yeah, Brown, just sleep it off. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We just kind of ignored him. And out of desperation, what happened was that I turned this guy in. I knew he had a contact book. We were on special training one time, and that's where he was approached by this organization. And so he had a little book with contacts on it and everything. Then I knew about this book. So I turned him in. They took me to Battery Control Central. Then they took me to S2, which was a security place. I talked to the top brass and everything, and went in for a debriefing. And unfortunately, one of the people in S2 was a secretary who was a customer of mine, and he recognized me going into a vault with all of the people. And what happened a week later was there was a major drug bust, and my buddy, who was a drug guy, got busted. Well, who was the narc? Hey, well, we saw Wilhelmsen go into a vault with the generals. He had to be the narc. So next thing you know, I got a contract out on me. And they even came up to me and told me the date that I was going to die. He said, you better make arrangements with the man because you're dead. I thought, these guys are my friends. They're just messing with me. They're not taking this serious. They're just trying to freak me out. Because in the service, you do that with everybody anyway, and always playing head games and stuff. So I thought that's what it was. It ended up being real. I actually escaped. And who I was escaping were some of the first responders that had 10 years experience going in and executing people at the government's direction. These guys were nobody to mess with, and certainly a rookie like me could not be up to par to their standards of their efficiency. I was one scared kid trying to struggle for my life. I escaped. It was supernaturally. I passed out on the day that they were supposed to kill me, and we're taught about being in a firefight. We double tap. In other words, in a firefight, you go up and you put around back of the neck up into the head so you make the person brain dead, just to make sure they don't get up and cause any other problem, especially in Vietnam, especially something we learned from World War II. That's just the way you had to do with an enemy that was willing to die as a martyr for their beliefs. They didn't do that to me. I was spared somehow. And somehow I, got back safely. I talked to this one guy. He says, don't go off base. I'll talk to people down in Miami, and we'll see what's happened. So he came back. He says, Jim, don't trust anybody. For God's sakes, don't leave this base, and don't worry about it. Everything's been handled. And I said, what do you mean handled? He says, well, you don't understand. Once a contract is carried out, somebody's going to die. He says, your buddy jumped the gun. He was being watched by the government. He jumped the gun and exposed himself and his others higher ups. And they know you're innocent because they did know about this other thing, because I was in the room when you turned these guys in, and I knew what was going down, but I just didn't want to get involved in it. So, but I let them know you're off the hook. Your buddy's going to be dead Sunday, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I said, no, wait a minute. I don't want to be responsible for any of his death. I'll take my own chances on this thing. He said, no, you don't understand. It's going to be carried out. You've got nothing to do with it. You know, this is just the way things got to be. So that Sunday, he was out in the Everglades. He lived off base because he was not an officer, but he was a sergeant that could live off base. So he had he was out riding, and somebody did a hit and run. He was decapitated, and he died. He died, I lived. I knew it was a miracle. I knew there must have been a God that had a plan for my life, because I couldn't explain it any other way. So the Darwinist ended up quitting his theory of evolution and realized, oh my God, there's a God that loves me. He's in control. I got to
I'm not
find out
sure
who
what
he
did
is.
they actually do to you. Did they miss? Did they try to kill you? And what did
No,
they
you know, this is something I may never know exactly what exactly happened. Now, what happened was when I realized that I was in jeopardy, I was in a room with all these people, and I realized, oh my God, they're going to kill me. This is why all these people are here. They really were telling me the truth. So I said, hey guys, I got to go get me a pack of cigarettes. So they sent a guy to go with me. It was out, the vending machine was just outside of his apartment. So I bent over and got them the cigarettes, but I put my elbow into the guy's stomach, solar plexus. I literally lifted him right off the ground, knocked the wind out of him. I knew the general direction of where the highway was and how to get back to the base. So I just ran. I mean, I just beelined it through the Everglades. I knew there was, this was a dry season, fortunately, so that the canal system that was around the streets usually would be filled with water and hungry alligators. But fortunately, this was a dry time, so there was no alligators. The water was dry. I'm fairly safe. Just follow, you know, through the Everglades. You'll hit Palmetto Expressway, and then you'll get back to the base. Now, as I come to a clearing, and it was the only avenue to get to the base, I thought, oh my gosh, if they were going to jump me, this is the place they're going to jump me at. I said, man, I don't know whether so I'm sitting back and I'm wondering, what am I going to do? Am I going to cross through here? Is there a way to circumvent and go around? No, there really isn't. I mean, that's where you're getting into the wet, swampy areas where there still are hungry alligators around to chomp you. So, you know, I didn't want to take a chance on that. So I said, okay, I'm going to go through. But man, this is, if anybody's going to jump me, it would be here. And sure as heck, I got to the opening. All of a sudden, somebody with a shotgun right across from me fired off a round. I dove into the dry ditch. I looked up. Now, it was starting to get dusk, so the moon was just coming up over the horizon. And I noticed that there was a plowed field behind me. And all of a sudden, I saw a guy with a rifle coming up from behind me. Then a pickup truck screeched to a halt in the middle of the intersection. 4 guys came out, and they had rifles, and they're all zooming in on me. Now, I got to tell you, I literally pissed my pants. I cried out to mama first, like people do when they're dying in combat. And then I said, oh, God, help me. And I passed out, and I went into the ditch. I woke up. The moon was already on the other horizon. I had been there all night long, passed out. What happened during that time, I don't know. I may never know until I get into heaven and see a review of.
But didn't they tell you? Didn't anyone tell you what happened? They were there.
Nobody said anything after that. You know, I didn't know. Now I made my way to the expressway. Now I was sweaty, stinky. I remember they had these orange grove spiders is what they called them. They looked like a garden spider, you know, with a big abdomen and big, long, stringy, you know, legs. The only thing is they're about the size of my hand. And they said that, you know, you can't even barely go, if you walk in the orange groves, they'll spin their webs in between the trees. And so if you walk through them, you got to really go at a brisk pace to even bust through their webs. So nobody ever told me whether they were poisonous or not. I don't know. Guess what? I'm going through and I hit one of these, so I just speed up. And the next thing I know, I felt something on my shirt. I looked down, and this thing was about this big, and it was just ready to go up here on my face. Now, if I try to brush it off, boom, I'm maybe dead. I don't know. So I turned my head. I went like this. I squished it until I could feel it oozing behind me, and I threw it on the ground. I couldn't even look at it. I was one that, you know, if I got a little tiny spider on me, I go, ooh, ooh, like this. Well, you know what? After that experience, I was never scared of a spider again in my life. But this thing had crawled up. I killed it. So I got all of this stuff on me, not somebody you want to pick up who's hitchhiking. These 2 women come and pick me up. Now, it's in the 60s. Obviously, I got short hair, so I'm from the base. And so she said something about that. And she says, well, come on, we'll take you where you need to go. down the road because we're going that way near Homestead anyway. Then she kept looking back at me and looking back at me. Now I'm going to back up 8 months before this event. I'm in Livonia, Michigan. There's this young girl on a little dirt bike, and she's wearing biker apparel. So I can tell that she's, from maybe sub-club oriented kind of a situation. Now I'm on my 1946 Harley Chopper, and I'm flying my colors for the club that I'm in. Not somebody you want to pick you up at 11 o'clock at night in a desolate country neighborhood. But I happened to work, or used to work, at a Clark gas station, was just a quarter mile down the road. And this was before cell phones or anything. It's 1960, early part of 1969. Yeah, it was 1969. So I pulled over. I said, what's the matter? And she says, oh, my bike broke down. I said, well, hey, there's a gas station just a quarter mile ahead. I'll take you there. You can call your husband or, somebody to give you a hand. And she said, what about my bike? And I said, oh, let's just put it over here by this tree, this electrical pole. It should be all right. This is a safe neighborhood. You're out in the boondocks. Nobody, I never even lock up my bike in the driveway, and I live in the neighborhood here. So I talked her into it. So I picked her up. I took her over to the phone. She called her husband. Her husband was the president of an Ann Arbor club, they were the 1%er. They're the bad boys. And the guy says, hey man, I'll make you, thanks for saving my wife. He says, whatever you need, whatever you want, me and my boys, we're going to help you out. You want to be an honorary member of my club, anything you want. And I said, nah, I appreciate it, man. But in 6 months, I'm going to be wearing OD green, and I'm doing the Army thing for a while. We got this little Vietnam War going on. And so I'm going to join before I get drafted, so I can have a pick of where I'm going to be and what I'm going to do. So he was very thankful. She was very thankful. Now we'll speed back up. Guess who picks me up hitchhiking? The woman.
Oh, wow.
How in the heck could that ever happen, except it be some kind of divine appointment from a God that was really trying to cover my stupid little butt. And so here she picks me up. She keeps looking in the back of the mirror, and she says, boy, you look awfully familiar. And I said, nah, you probably don't know where I'm from. I'm from a little podunk city called Livonia, Michigan. She goes, oh my God, you're him. We were just talking about you. I was telling you, my girlfriend, about this, my angel that came and helped me when I was lost in Livonia when my bike broke down. And I said, oh my gosh, that bike was a Ducati. You're the gal that I picked up that. She says, you got it. She says, honey, where do you need to go? I'm going to take you right to the door. And I was thinking, oh, thank God, because one place that they could pick me up and I would have never been found again was hitchhiking off of the expressway. So I got safely to the base. I went right over and talked to the one guy. He went right into town. And then so all the dominoes were in place. The Bible says that all things work together for good to them love God, who them who are called according to his purpose. I was called by him, but I wasn't even clueless to listen. Now, the funny thing is,
the mystery though is, why didn't they shoot you that night? All those guys.
I'll
why
tell
did
you,
they shoot you?
That's what I'd like to know, man.
What's your theory?
Seriously.
Did they think you're gonna die anyways, make it look natural? What do you think?
I have no idea. The Bible is filled with so many different events like that, where an overwhelming enemy had taken out one of God's people. One time there was a king and a prophet, and they were up against a huge force. I mean, it was like 200 to 1 force of the Amalekites. And they were up against this force, and it looked like they were going to be wiped out. And then all of a sudden, God showed this superior army, an angelic army behind them that was surrounding them. They saw it and they realized, oh my God, we're overpowered. Look at the forces they have with them. Look at the supernatural power they have with them. They got so scared they turned on each other and killed each other and wiped themselves out. So, so if that Bible story was actually real, my situation, I don't know what they saw. I don't know what they were thinking in their heads. I don't know why I'm still alive. That was my wake-up call. Why am I still alive? Matter of fact, when I first got up, I remember the Twilight Zone episode. I mean, there's another, I can quote almost all the episodes of Twilight Zone. I grew up with them. I watched them a million times on New Year's and everything. And so I remembered one episode where the guy was dead and his body was down on the ground and he didn't know it. So I'm looking back when I got up, I'm looking back in the ditch to see if I'm still there, and I wasn't. Then I actually pinched myself. Ow, that hurt. Okay, I must be still alive, but why? How? So, it's one of those things. I may never know until I get into eternity to see what the heck happened. What caused them to not follow normal procedure that they were trained in to do? And that's to make sure by putting one in my, why am I still alive? I have no idea. But it got my attention that, oh my gosh, there's a God, he's in control. I better find out who he is. This is what I said about being a donkey. It took me 4 years after that. I was searching anything and everything except that Jesus. I had a couple of biker friends in the early 60s before me. They got saved, and all of a sudden they're wearing suits and we're carrying a little Bible. I'm going, oh, you guys went crazy, man. You're nuts. You know, you're just, that's insane. How did you get stupid all of a sudden? You know, and all of a sudden it all made sense. Oh my gosh. They found something so special and they tried to tell me, and I wouldn't even give them the time of day. Matter of fact, I mocked the one guy. Normally he could have swept the ground up with me, but now all of a sudden, he's a Christian, so you're not going to fight back or anything. So now I can tease him and taunt him, and I did. Once I did get saved, he was one of the first people I came back to and says, dude, man, I'm sorry. You were trying to give me something most important and I wasn't listening, but now let me tell you what happened in the Army, and I'm listening now, but it took me 4 years. Anything but the name of Jesus. I don't want that Jesus guy. No, that can't be right.